G'day, g'day. Welcome back. In today's episode, did you really think that kids would not be forced to the dark corners of the internet? As we predicted, they have been. We discussed the social media ban that has hit Australia today. Then we dig into commuting communists. Turns out that maybe communist just means likes commuting a lot and bringing your family along too. And finally, we discuss some good news. DEI is dying in Australia. There is no more pride in hiring prideful people. All that and more on the Mark Perrotta Show.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Blaster! Welcome to the Mark Perrotta Show.
The top headline for today is that my voice is finally on the mend. Still not 100%, still a little bit croaky, but we can finally speak without testy popping every 3.5 seconds. But outside of that, the biggest news story today, which we will dig into a little bit more later, is Australia's under 16 social media ban has gone into effect. Now, this has caused chaos, calamity, but also pretty obviously a surge of downloading random, unknown, untested, unverified applications to effectively do the same thing. One Nation has gained control of a record high primary vote in latest polling. According to the most recent poll, One Nation has reached its highest ever primary vote at 17%, driven in part by high-profile incidents such as the controversial burqa stunt. I think it might have more to do with the fact that Pauline gave a really awesome speech down in Victoria just over the last weekend. Not only was her speech incredible, but the voice of my friend Anika has gone viral across the internet. Now, there is something to be said for identity politics, right? When an African immigrant comes to this nation and says, come here, pucker up, become an Australian, or don't come here at all, people tend to take it a little bit more seriously. Maybe we've got a white weakness problem in this country. And I'm not saying that it's, the whites have to be better and the whites are better than all the other races, because we're not. But we do have a very sincere victim complex where we have to apologize just for being who we are. Not being treated as people, but being treated as white people. Or as many people in the world call us today, whiteys, just the YT. Not racist at all. The poll has also highlighted public anxiety about rising living costs, and a majority expect increases in grocery, energy, and housing prices leading into 2026. A record number of Indigenous deaths in custody, the worst since 1979. New data shows 33 of the last 113 people who died in police custody or in prison over the last financial year were First Nations people. Now, that accounts for almost 33% of the entire population, or a third of the population who have died in custody, when Indigenous people only make up just over 3% of the Australian population. Now, as we spoke about with Anika, the issue is what is classified as a death in custody. 70% of all Indigenous deaths in custody are suicide. That is 70%. The next 10 to 15% are effectively drug-related incidents, and the remainder tend to be health issues like strokes, heart attacks, etc. And then you have the scatterings of things that are classed as Indigenous deaths in custody, including the case that we spoke about recently of Jai Wright. Now, Jai Wright hit a police vehicle with a stolen motorbike, and that death was classed as a police death in custody. Not only that, the police officer is now convicted for the crime of parking his car in a dangerous way. Now, if that car had been any other vehicle that had stopped because there was a large police presence in the area, then nothing would have happened. But because this was a police officer who, in his duty, was ensuring that The child who was traveling 70 kilometers an hour down a 50-kilometer-an-hour road on a stolen motorbike with what seems to be no helmet, recklessly endangering the lives of every citizen who is in that area. That police officer is now convicted of what is effectively homicide. Now, it's not classed as that, but he could go to jail for 10 years. A GoFundMe has been set up, which has hit almost $150,000 in order to fund his legal costs for an appeal. That is awesome news to me. I feel bad for the boy who died. He was 16 years old. He was just a kid. Who I do not feel bad for are his parents, who have gone on every television camera available to them, crying about how terrible it is and how bad the cops are and how they should have done better. You should have done better. Your son should never have been in that situation. Your son should never have been in a situation where he even thought to himself, you know what I might do with my Monday morning? I'm going to go steal a trail bike with my friends who are going to steal some Mercedes-Benz, and I'm going to go on a joyride through the city streets and pretend like that's not going to end catastrophically. What did you do as a father to stop that behavior? Before you had to come out and cry that it's a police officer's fault that your son is dead. It's not the police officer's fault. It's barely your son's fault. It's your fault. I can't say that any clearer. And I have pain in my heart for you as a father myself, but you brought that on yourself. Your son should never have been in that situation. You should be far more introspective instead of pointing the finger at every other person in this situation. You are the man of that household. You should have been showing him how to be a man, not how to be a criminal. Unfortunately, making these sorts of little please do's is kind of essential. I enjoy doing it just for the fun of it, but at the same time, if you want to get a message out, you need the people in your community to just comment, like, subscribe, all of the normal jargon, right? Please just take a moment and give me a hand. We need to create a culture of commentary together. And I love the messages coming in my DMs. Put it in the comments section so that everyone else can see it too. Thank you. A new mothership cocaine smuggling attempt has been foiled off the WA coast. Authorities recently seized 525 kilograms of cocaine tied to a mothership vessel, a livestock carrier, off the coast of Lankellan, highlighting evolving and sophisticated drug smuggling methods. Some high sheep. Can you imagine that? A couple of bags burst out and one of the sheep took a mouthful of cocaine. Experts warn that such maritime-based smuggling is part of a dizzying variety of approaches used by criminal syndicates to traffic drugs into Australia. We do have a gun ban in Australia, but turns out we don't have a grenade ban because an arrest over a grenade and gunfire attack in Sydney's Tallawong suburb has sparked fear. A 19-year-old man has been charged following a violent incident in Sydney's northwest, where a grenade and firearms were allegedly used in an attack on a home. How do you have a grenade? Like, where are you just getting grenades from? In Australia. I don't think I've ever seen a grenade even in a museum, let alone have one purchased and then used in an actual attack. Crime in Victoria, surprise, surprise. Statewide statistics from Victoria show crime has reached record highs with a notable 40% increase in theft from motor vehicles. Authorities attribute a significant portion of the surge to a relatively small number, about 5,400 repeat offenders, who commit a disproportionate share of the crime. And we know who they are. The police officer, we showed this several episodes ago, the police officer came out and said, hey, we know exactly where they live, who they are, who their parents are, when they got here, and they're all, not all, but the majority of them are African immigrants. That is not a surprising set of circumstances. When you bring people in from a nation that has severe crime issues, even as refugees, and they all conglomerate into one or two suburbs, creating little gangs of youths, This is what happens. On the flip side of that coin, youth justice reforms in Queensland, GPS monitoring for offenders aged as young as 10. The government in Queensland is extending electronic monitoring laws, lowering the minimum age for ankle tracking from 15 to 10 years old. Under the proposed changes, courts could impose trackers on first-time offenders aged 10 to 17, even without prior serious offending or their consent. A move met with concern by child advocacy groups. Of course it was, because child advocacy groups are also the kind of people who are saying that we should be chopping off boys' penises or giving girls hormones so they don't grow breasts before they could chop them off. These are the same sorts of people. These child advocacy groups are the same people who are lobbying for all of this, what is genital mutilation in a first world nation. And so we should not just take it with a pinch of salt, but when one of these people speaks, we ought to laugh in their faces and tell them to bugger off. Let's get into our major news items. I look young enough to be under 16, surely. Probably not. Not anymore. Children have aged me, and I smile too much with my eyes, and so I'm wrinkly as all hell. But this morning I woke up and I opened TikTok probably 10 to 15 minutes after my coffee kicked in, and I was greeted with a message that just said, hey, by the way, social media is now only for over 16s. I hit OK, and I proceeded. Turns out that was the experience for a whole load of people. Not only that, the facial recognition software, specifically on Snapchat, has already started failing. 14, 15-year-olds are all coming out saying that they were able to pass through it with no problems. That's the issue with something like facial recognition, especially in a country like Australia, which has a high density population of Asians. Now, I don't know if you've ever met an Asian in your lifetime, but I've met plenty of 40-year-old Asians, specifically the women, who look about 13 years old. Granted, most of the people who are coming out are white, but how is that going to work? I once met an 89-year-old man who didn't look a day over 40. Asian, of course. Facial recognition software simply does not work for everyone equally. Arabs grow beards at 14, some of them. Some people never grow a beard at all. Some kids have had so much struggle in their lives that they're wrinkling by the time they're 13, 14. If you accidentally get some dirt on your face during a footy match, it might look a little bit like a beard. None of these measures can work effectively at this broad scale, which is why it should never have been incumbent upon social media companies to enforce this ban. This is a parenting problem, not a problem for parents. Yes, algorithms are predatory. We all agree with that. No child should be exposed to that before they've been given the ability to actually understand what is happening when the algorithms kick in. But it is not the social media company's job to ensure that your kids are safe. They are your children. If you're very worried about it, get rid of their smartphones. If you're very worried about it, download some apps that can actually block this sort of stuff. VPNs are already in high use. And now, kids are going to the dark corners of the internet. TikTok is being replaced by something called Lemon8, which is a product that has been advertised by TikTok from the same parent company as TikTok for the better part of the last 12 to 18 months. Let's take a look at this clip. It's from 10 News.
Well, to no one's surprise, there has been a surge in downloads of apps which currently fall outside of the government ban. Currently topping the charts is Lemonade, which describes itself as a lifestyle community developed by the same company behind TikTok. Second is Yope, which describes itself as a safe and simple way to send photos to your friends. Coverstar is self-described as a positive social site, which looks similar to TikTok or Reels with a feed of videos. And fourth is Meta's WhatsApp, which has been exempted from the current rules due to its messaging functionality.
So not only can kids get around this ban very easily by using a VPN, but they can also now download apps that are far less regulated and unknown at all by their parents. At the very least, the applications that have existed previously are known by mum and dad. I can follow my kid on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, X. Lemon8? What on earth is that? Yope? Nope. The issue with banning social media or banning anything for a kid, for that matter, especially children who are as tech savvy as this generation is in its entirety, is that they will find ways around it. I was pretty tech savvy as a kid, and my dad tried to put up as many blockers as humanly possible. Do you know how many of them really worked? None. It is almost impossible if you have a tech savvy kid. Now, the modern day has modern solutions to those problems. There are actually applications that exist that even I would struggle to get through. But just placing a blanket ban and thinking that that is going to work, good luck. Kids are just going to go to the fringes, those fringe applications that for now seem like they are all fine and dandy. We'll see their profit margins increasing and find ways to maintain those customers. The socially positive sites will eventually transition into the same monstrous applications that TikTok are right now. And the government, after having spent God knows how much money to get this across the line, and after having been sued by American courts for infringements on free speech, will have achieved nothing except annoying the next generation. So chances are this will be a good thing. It'll probably be good for One Nation, who has been against this ban from the very, very beginning. It'll be good for every person who is truly pro-family, good for every good parent. And at the end of the day, this is going to flop just like every other major ban that this government has tried to push through. Just look at the vape ban. Have you seen a reduction in vapes recently? The major crackdowns that are coming? Nope. Every human being on earth can still go down to their local tobacconist and buy a fruity vape. You know why? Because these sorts of blanket bans cannot be policed. Ever. You can threaten fines as much as you want. $59 million might seem like a lot of money. But right now, with the way that the Australian economy is going, it's about $17 million US. And not only that, they're going to laugh in our faces and say bugger off. Good luck. Let's get into commuting communists. I stayed within the rules. I did not do anything that was outside of the regulation. There is something seriously blind to history about someone who says that sort of thing when they're called out for something that is obviously wrong. Did you know that slavery was once legal? Was it a good thing? According to these people, it would have been, because it was within the law. And so no matter how you try and spin the way that these Liberal, Labor, every single MP on earth has been using this family reunion expense, it's bad. The law needs to be changed to only be for a trip that is more than a month long. You can go 3 to 4 weeks without seeing your partner. There will be caveats, obviously, for breastfeeding mothers. That's it. You know what you are signing up for. Don't come to me and tell me a sob story about the fact that you're going to miss hubby for the next week if he doesn't come to watch the footy with you. Yes, you're the Minister for Sport, and so your ticket to the grand final should be covered. You're there in your official capacity. Your husband isn't there in his official capacity. Is he the Minister for Sport? Is he the first Minister for Sport? The first man, or whatever it is, the first lady? I'm assuming. I don't know. You have a husband. But for Anika Wells to claim this is within the law and within the legal boundaries, then more than likely you are either blind to the fact that what you are doing is clearly illegal, no matter what the letter of the law says, or you're being willfully ignorant. I'm going to say it's probably number 2. I can do it, so I will do it. It's like the purge. These would be the sorts of people who during the purge don't bunker down. They're like, well, it's allowed. Why can't I chop the head off my neighbor because the purge says it's fine? They really annoyed me yesterday. It's now legal, so I'm going to do this. You are the bad guy in the purge movie, not the good guy. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's right. Let's listen to her stumbling for about 3 minutes over questions.
Opting for a cost-free mode of transport today, walking.
Morning, everyone.
Anika Wells draws a crowd to explain why she's charged taxpayers so much to be part of the crowd at major events.
I'm very happy to answer your questions.
Minister, you're going to think twice before charging taxpayers for non-essential travel.
Mark, I always give really thoughtful care into the decisions I make around my program.
A program with a hefty price tag for taxpayers, $95,000 for her New York trip, more for the Paris Olympics, $2,800 for a family ski trip, $1,000 for a government car to wait 7 hours at the Australian Open tennis, $1,200 for 10 hours waiting at the NRL Grand Final.
My job is to follow the rules. I have followed the rules. I will always continue to follow the rules.
That, following the script, a defence used 9 times.
I've abided by the rules. Must follow the rules. I have followed the rules.
Hoping for a circuit breaker, referring all her claims to the Independent Parliamentary Expenses Authority for audit. But you've already been audited, Minister. All these things have been audited, some of them twice, by the same authority. We know what the answer is going to be. They're going to say they're within the rules. But the rules don't meet community standards.
These rules are set at arm's length from parliamentarians.
But Anika Wells isn't alone and far from the worst offender. All sides do it and voters hate it.
This is a text line to the viewers of this show. I'm a pensioner. I can't afford heating and cooling, and I'm looking at these politicians and it's disgusting. That Comcar bill for $1,000 to wait 8-10 hours, that's my weekly wage.
People are crying out to say it's unfair. It doesn't pass the pub test.
I understand that perfectly, and I understand where people are coming from.
And where
Albo specifically. You have no idea where these people are coming from. No idea. Not really. You might have had a tough childhood, but you were a child. You didn't have to bear the weight of the responsibility of actually putting food on the table. Your mother did. You have lived a life of exuberance effectively since then. Not only exuberance, but taxpayer-funded exuberance. You've been in politics your entire career. Not the worst offenders, I'll tell you that much. Now, there aren't too many hypocrites quite like Sarah Hanson Young. Sarah Hanson Young is partnered to what is effectively a billionaire oligarch lobbyist. She's a Greens senator, which means she's technically a democratic socialist, who loves the environment but loves culling all of the forest space on Earth to build wind farms. And not only that, as a democratic socialist who believes entirely in ensuring that the richest of the rich are taxed, while being partnered with the richest of the rich, a man who is on the top 10 list of covert power brokers, a review by the Financial Review back, I believe, in 2019, has also been using taxpayer money, not for the impoverished people who she so dearly believes deserve more and more and more of the money of the people who actually make money in this country. No, the person who needs a whole lot of money is her multi-millionaire husband, who is part of one of the largest lobbying groups in Australia, that is the Australian Institute, spending, and this is allegedly, approximately $50,000 on family reunion expenses to fly him to and from Parliament House. Let's listen to this clip from Sky News.
Really breaking tonight, Andrew, is the one in the Australian, in the front page of the Australian, which is that Sarah Hanson Young, the great hypocrite from the Greens, her husband is a fully fledged, high-flying lobbyist. And she appears to have flown him to work in Canberra, where he works as a lobbyist for big companies, and flown him back home again. Now, if he did a single moment of lobbying for clients while the taxpayers funded and facilitated that, then that's a huge, huge scandal. And that could be breaking in today's Australia.
Doesn't get much clearer than that. All of these politicians need to have their expenses checked. There's a Nationals minister, right? So we're not just talking Labor and the Greens here. This is a sweeping across the board change that needs to happen. He has flown his wife every single week of sitting Parliament since like 2022, 2023. Every week of sitting Parliament. That's to and from, go home for the weekend. it is your job. You know what your job is. There's two ways that you could fix this very easily. One, blanket rule that says you, as a senator, as a parliamentarian, you know what you're signing up for. You don't get to fly mum and dad in. You don't get to fly your wife and your kids in every week for your job. A private business would never do this. You can't just take your wife and kids with you everywhere you go. Why? It's not feasible. Now, these are only a few cases. I'm sure this is across the board. But it's hypocritical when it comes from the left, because they claim that taxes are the only way that we can ever actually solve all of the fiscal inequality inside of our nation. And simultaneously, they're some of the richest people on earth. They're paid upwards of $150,000 a year. All of them. $150,000 plus. $150,000 is like the bottom of the bottom. But you can't fly your husband every now and then to go and watch the footy on your own dime. The dime that you make from the taxpayer already. It's across the board. I'm sure it is. The rules need to change. But the second way we can fix it, we live in a digital age. Create the Star Wars hologram parliament. Okay? Just do it. Everyone can jump on Zoom today. If you live in remote Western Australia, the Northern Territory, you're the member for Parliament there, why on earth do you need to fly out to Parliament every single time there's something going on? We have the NBN. It's super, super reliable. Why can't you just do it from your home office? Hey, you've got to come out once a month. All right? If we're sitting for the next 6 weeks, over the course of the next 6 weeks, you've got to come out every 3 weeks. Okay, that means you're on site for 2 out of the 6 weeks of sitting Parliament. Save the taxpayers' money. Use it for something productive. Stop using it to fly people just so they can sit in, if they even sit in. I'm not sure if you've ever watched a parliamentary session, but half the chamber's empty. At best, half the chamber is empty most of the time, except question time, where everyone gets to sit in and scream at each other. Let's get on to our last topic, because my voice is failing. Have you guys ever done opposite day? That's what it feels like when you're doing some sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion training. Whatever you think the answer is, it is opposite day. Choose the opposite of whatever you think it is. That'll get you pretty much 100% of the time. You've got the correct answer. In awesome news, though, The Guardian has reported, and this is according to a report from Pride in Diversity, PID, which, yes, that's a real thing. They're reporting that several major Australian employers are cutting back or abandoning diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, due in part to pressure from growing global anti-woke movements. Among surveyed senior leaders, about 1 in 10 indicated their companies are scaling back or removing diversity-related initiatives, including transgender inclusion training. Some firms are rebranding or reframing DEI as inclusion and diversity, aiming to reposition efforts as universal workplace fairness rather than targeted social engineering or diversity identity politics. This is a policy that should never have happened, specifically in the private sector. And we've seen the results. Private sector effectiveness has dropped dramatically, specifically in Australia. The ability for people to do their jobs properly has reduced dramatically, specifically within Australia. Everyone has to tiptoe around whether you're saying the politically correct thing for fear of getting pinged by HR. It is not something that the average worker should have to worry about. Not only that, new laws in Australia are now structuring that a boss is personally liable for your well-being. That's something we'll be speaking about in another episode. Diversity, equity, and inclusion policies have been both racist, sexist, and every otherist effectively since the beginning of their inception. Now, this is something that Charlie has fought against, or had fought against for his entire career. The idea that you should be allowed into any space just because of the color of your skin, because of the gender that you choose, or because of the identity that you have put upon yourself, is something that was always antithetical to how you create successful businesses. The entire point of being non-racist, non-sexist is that you do not look at that stuff. You look at the qualities that you bring to a role. You look at the benefit that you could provide to the business. What does it matter what you look like? Why does a company need to have perfect representation across the board? Why would we need 50-50 male and female in any role? I've said this before, but does your father not speak for you? As a young girl, does your father not speak for you? As a young man, do you not trust your mother, your sister, your cousin, your first primary school teacher? It does not matter what your basic biological building blocks are, the things that make you who you are. It's what's up here. It's, can you fulfill this role? And a lot of people say, oh, it's sexist that you'd say that, or it's racist that you'd say that, because you're saying that, black people aren't as intelligent. That's not what we're saying at all. Are there jobs that certain people are better at? Yes, the NBA is the perfect example of that. All sports is the perfect example of that. Every one of the best NRL teams in Australia is filled with Indigenous people, with Samoans, with Islanders. There are like 20% of the population who are white. No one says that's racist, ever. Do you know why? Because they're the best for the job. When you go past a build site and you see that all the people laying bricks are men, do you sit there and go, oh, that's sexist? There you go, that looks like the worst job on earth. Those poor guys. And they're there having a laugh and probably actually having a good time because they're with the boys. It's about time we started getting over this insane ideology. This is the ideology that destroys nations, that destroys companies, that destroys families, just society in general. When you start having to look at someone's identity rather than their ability, then you have already failed as a company. There's no two ways about it. So I welcome this with all of my heart. I welcome a change to the rules to stop people from being able to fly all of their family in from God knows where to be with them for the AFL Grand Finals. And I most definitely welcome a change to the rules on the social media ban to make the people who are responsible, the people who should be responsible, the parents of children, plain and simple, across the board. That isn't even just for the social media ban. You as a parent are responsible for your own kids. No one else, just you. And the guardians that you so choose across their lives, obviously. Teachers, etc. It is about time that as a society we start taking accountability for our actions and stop caring so much about who you're sleeping with, what you look like, where you came from. Start thinking about the content of people's character rather than the color of their skin. My name is Mark Perotta, and this is the Mark Perotta Show. I'll speak to you guys on Saturday. God bless.